If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniac. My family owns a lot of land, and on this land we often have problems with squatters. My dad and one of my friends and I would all go out to check out places where apparently people were staying that shouldn't be. I mean, we had more than enough private property signs, and they're just annoying, especially if they're potentially doing lawless activities on our property. So one night, we have such an event. Someone's been sleeping in one of our cabins. Yes, it's derelict, but it's ours, and apparently, they look like they're crackheads. Ah, great. Not only have we got to clear it up, but we're also going to have to take out some drugs so nobody or any of our animals can get hurt on them. Unfortunately for us, we have to check it out quick, because my mum's getting really worried, and nightfall's about to set, which only makes it worse for us. We walk up there, and we're just having a laugh, saying, I hope they're not armed, because I know that we are. All of us have rifles on us, and my dad has a shotgun. If it comes to it, heck, we're going to light them up. I'm not going to take any risks, and the law's not going to be on their side if they're already breaking the law but also trespassing on our property. We get in there, and it's quiet. Just too quiet. My dad said he's going to go outside for a cigarette. I decide to join him. We're really confused because we had seen them a couple of nights ago. They must still be around here. Eventually all of us are outside. I turn my back on the cabin for 1 second and I hear a loud pitched scream. It makes me drop my cigarette. I look around and can't find the source of the sound. We all have our hands on our weapons. We now see a faint glow behind us. I suddenly have this warm feeling. I'm not one to believe in the paranormal, but it's strange. I turn round and to my horror, the entire cabin's been set on fire. I mean, not like a normal natural fire you could start with even a match, like the whole thing had been doused in gasoline. Like somebody was waiting for us to stay in there, heard the door close, and then tried to burn us alive. We never actually found out who did this, but my god, would we have let them have it if we found them. We called the police, but unfortunately, as the cabin had burnt down, there was no evidence in there, and the case remains unsolved to this day. This is my mum's story that happened when she's about 18 years old. Back then she lived in a small town in Germany, and she would go on bike tours frequently. This particular day, she wanted to ride the bike to the forest, have a picnic there and ride back home. She had done that a bunch of times and said it wasn't an unsafe place to be, and she would always set up her stuff near the road, just in case. Anyway, when she almost got to the spot she usually goes, there's a boy fixing his bike. My mum said he's maybe 14. My mum wasn't on the bike anymore. She was wheeling it, because she was almost there. When passing the guy, he jumps her, and the next thing she knows, she's face down on the ground. She instantly starts yelling at him to get off and what are you doing? He instantly gets up, but my mum takes the opportunity to get the hell out of there. My mum didn't call the cops or anything because, well, nothing happened. This isn't all though. Fast forward 4 or 5 years on, a few towns over, this guy's on the news for murder. He would wait for women in the park, pounce on them and kill them. My mum was just glad that this happened when she was younger, because if he was older he might have been stronger and managed to get her dead in the forest. I like primitive camping, and me and my wife go out sometimes by ourselves. We usually bring the dog and spend a couple of nights. This time we invited some friends for drinking. Anyway, on the first day, we heard a vehicle coming down the road. Not odd. There are maybe 10 sites or more several miles down the road. It's a dirt road, with nothing there but these primitive sites. One way in and one way out. What's odd though, is that the vehicle that they see is a meat packing truck. It was old, really old, and the lettering was faded. It was faded in beige. None of us really made out the person driving it. There were no plates on the back either. So we all get creeped out collectively, but kind of decide it's not too weird. Maybe they're just renting it out for the cheap. Flash forward to the morning. My mum calls. She's panicking. Freaking out. Apparently, some hikers were literally abducted within a few miles of us. There are several girls out at our site too, and my mum's convinced it was the people we saw. I wasn't 100% certain, so pull out my GPS. It was less than half a mile from where we were. I don't remember much of what happened after, but we got the hell out of there. When I was a kid, I grew up at a campground. I'd literally spend the whole summer there, as a relative managed it and worked night security, so I'd been camping throughout my life. On my 21st birthday, some buddies and I decided to go on a trip and do some real camping away in the bush. We Google Mapsed a nice spot near a river along the coast of Lake Superior, out of our way. It was only a few hours to boat there, and we would canoe along the beach for a few miles to get to this spot. We're talking real remote. The nearest road was 5 miles away, and other than trekking through the woods, the only way to get there would be to go back the way we come from, along the beach. So we set up camp near dark, got a nice fire going, and just drank for a few hours. So around midnight, we're all getting tired. After all the paddling and stuff, we were pretty ready to get our tents out. Now, even though I've been camping my whole life, I'm still a light sleeper. I can hear something moving around outside the tents normally. Now right now, I hear heavy footsteps. They're clearly from shoes. I assume it's not an animal, obviously, but it's just one of my friends going to use the bathroom. Even though I don't hear any zipper sounds to the tent, the steps begin to slowly fade away towards the beach. After about 20 minutes or so, I forget about them and begin to drift off to sleep. The next morning, we all get up and start making breakfast and collecting wood. The walking never comes up and we carry on. Now later in the day, we all head to the river to do some fishing and split off into groups. I'm fishing with the friend in the tent next to mine when the other guys split off. He starts saying if I heard anything last night. I tell him about the footsteps and he nods. He then tells me that about an hour after they walked off, they came back. I mentioned to him that it's probably someone from camp, and he tells me that he doesn't think so because they never went to the tent. He says that the steps walked past the tent, then carried on into the woods. Now jump forward to the last day of the trip. No steps are heard, all throughout the week. Until last night. We're all settled in nice and early, and we have to pack up our stuff and paddle back. And about half an hour in, I can hear steps off at the back edge of the clearing again. They're kind of faint, but as I can start to hear them more clearly, they picked up the pace until they're at full run. And they storm past all the tents into the beach again. We're talking full sprint, like you're running for your life, and it's loud as hell. This time, everyone wakes up and climbs out of their tents, flashlights and everything. We all jump out, but there's literally no signs whatsoever that anybody ran here. The soil in the area is fairly soft. If it was a deer or bear, there's going to be clear footprints, but a human? That would definitely leave some. Not even the grass was disturbed. I've never seen anything like it. Being in such a remote area, I really think it must have been something paranormal. Nobody got any sleep after that. We all pack up our stuff except the chairs and wait around the fire until the sun comes up, paranoid and ready. One of my buddies suggested it could be a Wendigo, but I don't know. Scared the life out of me. My family owned lots of swampland, and we had small cabins set up on some of these, because it could be really nice as a getaway sometimes. There's something about being out in nature which is just so relaxing and nice. All of that changed one day, however. When I was about 14, me and my best friend stayed in the cabin. We mostly played video games, and just had a good laugh. One night there was a really big thunderstorm, and we had to retreat from the cabin to get back inside. Now the next morning, my friend looked out the window and said, "Oh, I thought we were staying in the closest one to us." I said, "What are you talking about? We were." He said, "No, we couldn't have been." I looked out the window, and to my amazement, the cabin was no longer there. I then rushed downstairs to tell my dad, wondering what on earth has happened, and my mum meets me halfway up the stairs saying, "You're not going to believe what's happened. The ground that was underneath the cabin you two boys were staying in has collapsed, and the cabin's gone." To this day, it's one thing that's horrified me more than anything. The fact that we were so close to danger and didn't even know it. Heck, nobody knew it. These events took place in the spring of 2014. My friend Samantha and Tanny had finally agreed to come camping with me. The problem is that none of us were experienced in surviving the wilderness, but that didn't stop us. We packed up our gear, loaded up on food, alcohol, and made our way to our location. When we arrived at the spot, Sarah had Googled. We realized that we would have to hike for a while in order to find a spot suitable for camping. We hiked for some time before reaching a clearing. We set up camp and started a fire, opening a bottle of tequila. After some drinking and smoking a bit, I decided to start preparing dinner, so I left Samantha and Tanny by the fire as I was separating our dinner. As I was busy separating, I realized a man's approaching our camp. "Hey there," he said with a thick Irish accent. I was caught off guard as I wasn't expecting to see anyone, but nonetheless, he seems friendly, so I reply, "Oh, hey, I didn't even notice you. Been hiking for a while?" "Yeah, for a bit." "What are you cooking there?" He gestures to me. I invited him to join us because I'm not rude, and he seems nice. So we walk over to the fire where I introduce him to the others, who seem extremely unimpressed about our new guest. After eating dinner, we kept drinking, but during this time, it was becoming very clear that our guest had really taken a liking to me. He kept trying to move closer to me, and was paying little to no attention to my friends. He was only speaking and focusing on me, while drinking his bottle of whiskey. That's when things took a turn and his conversations become weird, making everyone uncomfortable. But it wasn't until he leant over, grabbed the back of my neck and said, "Come on, babe, get rid of these two idiots and come into the woods with me," before I could even react. And then, Tanny was already right behind him, trying her best to get him away from me, while screaming like a banshee. I can't remember what she was saying, but she was inventing her own words. It worked. He let go of my neck, took a step back, looked at Tanny, and let out the most sinister smile that I've ever seen. It was something that I can't describe. For that, he had beautiful teeth and a smile, but something about the combination of his eyes just filled me with goosebumps. Even typing this, I'm having the same reaction. He slowly starts walking away from my camp while laughing. I'm absolutely petrified, but decided to quickly tidy up before heading to my tent and hide. I was originally meant to sleep in my own tent while the other two shared, but we all went to the same one. Everything had been quiet for a while, with the exception of Tanny snoring. I was about to fall asleep when I hear twigs crunching and the sounds of footsteps fast approaching us. I lay still, holding my breath, completely immobilized by fear, until I heard my tent being opened, and Samantha let out a scream so loud that it even jolted the Irish psycho, and he jumps back a few steps. Tanny has been woken by the stage, and we're all standing outside the tent. Samantha and Tanny yelling, and I'm fumbling with my phone trying desperately to call the police. He then hits Tanny in the face. I drop everything. I yell, "Run, just run." I held Tanny's arm and don't look back. Importantly, we only have socks on, and we're running through the woods at night, with a psycho chasing us. I ran until I trip over a log, smash my chin down on the ground pretty hard. That's where all three of us stay hidden, low to the ground for a few hours, but it's pitch black. When we felt safe enough, we walk back to the campground and find everything destroyed. Both Samantha and Tanny had everything stolen of value. Weirdly though, my phone is smashed, not even stolen, making me realize how bad his intentions were. I thank my lucky stars I had no documents that could identify me. The last thing I wanted was him knowing where I lived. We don't waste any more time and ran back to our car as fast as possible, occasionally injuring ourselves on the way as we can barely see anything. We get to the car and I'm trying to start the engine, which is doing that sound it makes when it's about to die. When he sees us, he suddenly starts running out of the bushes towards us, laughing. We all scream hysterically and I floor it. God, I'm so scared. I drove like an absolute maniac until we reached the next town over, only to discover that my car's been tampered with and is leaking oil. God, it was done by that psycho. We eventually get picked up by Tanny's dad, taking us to the police station immediately. And unfortunately she broke her jaw in 2 places, and they never found him. I hate the fact that he's not been caught. For all I know, he could still be out there lurking on people, just like he did with us. I know that situation could have ended so much worse. Like I said before, the part I hate in all of this is that he smashed my phone, making sure there was no trace of him or his location. He wasn't even willing to steal the phone because he knew the police could probably track it. God, it makes me sick thinking about this. was at the office later than normal, but not excessively late. I left at about 6 and realised I needed gas, so I stopped at the 1-2 minutes from my job. It was still light out because of the summer, which made the situation weirder. I go to the gas station, and nothing has happened there before, so I was pretty relaxed and just tired in general from work. Now while I'm pumping gas, I see a truck pull in, which is kind of rusty with 2 guys in the front, but perpendicular in the way it's parked, which is weird, but I just keep filling my car so I can head home. The 2 guys just look like 2 guys from the country, a bit older, like 40s or 50s, but I felt uncomfortable. The guy driving was talking softly, but I ignored him at first. I didn't realise he was even trying to speak to me. The guy then yelled at me, which catches me off guard. I think I said something along the lines of, "Can I help you?" The driver was motioning for me to come closer to talk, which I didn't because it feels off. The guy finally spoke at a normal level and said they're looking for the shortest covered bridge. The country I'm in is known for this. This wasn't too weird of a question, but it's a little hard to point out without a map. I briefly told the guys the directions from the gas station and was grabbing the receipt. This is when all of the red flags go off in my head. He, the driver, asked me to lead them there now. It was out of the way and I say hell no and get in my car. He then starts screaming at me to get in their truck. Now this really scares me. He then starts to get out of his truck. I haven't got time for this. I floor it. The truck doesn't move, so I have to back out. I was worried about them following me, and they did follow my car, but I quickly take a few random turns and manage to lose them on the highway. Oh, the whole time the passenger was staring at me too. The whole thing was weird to me, but what scared me was that they were trying to get me out in the middle of nowhere to do God knows what to me. I'm just glad I got out of there when I did. I was a little young when this happened, so I don't really remember it. So this is a story my mum has told me. When I was around 5 or 6, my family and a family of friends all went camping together in New Hampshire. Each family had a camper and we all set up on one campsite. The campground had a playground, a lake nearby, and there was always something going on. One day, me and my friend Keisha, who was around the same age as me, were playing on our campsite as our mums talked outside the camper, keeping their eyes on us. At some point, an old man came walking by our campsite. He seemed like a normal guy according to my mum, but then he started to walk up and start a conversation with our parents. He said he owns a campsite a little way down the path, and that he has his own little playground in the backyard of his camper. He then said to me that my friends were allowed to come over any time that we wanted to play. My friend's mum was oblivious to the situation though, telling him it's a very nice gesture and we can later possibly. My mum on the other hand, who's to say the very least has experience with creeps, shut him down, told him no, go away. He walked away and my friend's mum started asking my mum why it's such a big deal. My mum told her that there's already a playground at the campsite and that we do not go under any circumstances. She even went around to the other campsites to warn people and stay away. Weeks pass, the camping trip is over and everyone's home for the rest of the summer. My mum is doing things around the house when she gets a phone call from her friend from the camping trip. She's freaking out. apologizing, telling her that she'll never go against her judgments again. Turns out, she turned the news on, and there he is. Apparently he got into a local pharmacy trying to get pictures developed, and he had hundreds of pictures of children. So this actually happened today. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood, and compared to the rest of my city, my area is considered safe. Well, I thought that was true until now. Me and my two foster sisters were walking home from school on the route we take every day, and we reached the intersection that we cross to get to our street. It's a very long wait until we're able to cross, and we usually just jaywalk. So me and one of my friends made it across, but my one friend got stuck in the middle with this girl who looks about the same age as us. And she just got off school, not saying anything. She's not saying anything, just kept walking. Now 2 or 3 minutes later, she's coming running behind me. And by then, we're at our house, and she tells us to get inside fast, but it takes forever for someone to open the door, and I'm asking her over and over again what's happening. And she just says, I think I was almost human trafficked, and at some point, the girl who was calmly walking down the street started behind us like nothing happened. When we finally got inside, she told me the girl started talking to her, and at first, my friend just thought she was being friendly when she asked what school she went to, but then the red flags began. She asked her who my other friend and I were, and where she was going, and where she lived at, and what her name was, and then she heard a car rev up their engine. She turned around to see a white van parked in a small parking lot across the street with 3 men in it, and the girl also looked, and started speaking faster, asking her if she wanted to walk home with her, and it's only down one street. Finally, the light said walk, and she took off. But that girl now knows where we live. But thankfully, my friend saw the red flags and didn't give away any information, or didn't agree to walk with her. And I know it may sound like maybe this girl was also scared, but when she walked past our house, she looked completely fine, like nothing happened. Like she was just a girl walking home from school. She didn't look at all unusual. We have yet to tell our parents what happened. I just pray I don't see that freaking van. When I was younger, my friends and my brothers would always go camping together. We weren't too old, and we didn't live too far from a big field and lake. It made great camping though, because it was away from things but not too far away from home. We had one incident, however, that is truly unbelievable, and it made us all never go camping again thereafter. So one night, we're all having a great time doing some fishing in the lake. We have our fire going, and we're just talking about random stuff when suddenly we hear a clicking sound from across the water. Now I can't pin down exactly what it was, but there was something very off about the sound. You could tell an animal wasn't making it, but we're literally the only people there. Anyway, we continue our fishing, and nights fell. What's stranger though, is the clickings persisted for well over an hour now, and that doesn't make any sense. My buddies are starting to get quite paranoid now because it seems to be getting louder. It's almost like no matter where you go, the clicking seems to follow you. I decide to investigate, and so does my brother, and we both stand up simultaneously. As we get up, we can see a figure across from us on the island in the lake. He looks freaking massive though, like at least 7 feet tall. It's so ridiculous, I don't even think it's a real person. We laugh about it saying, oh yeah, the tree scared us. But then the clicking starts even louder. We can now see there's a small fire on the island too. That come out of nowhere. Nobody saw it before. That makes no sense. And then it goes out suddenly. We both scream and look at the rest of the camp, who are also gathered on the shoreline looking at what this thing is. And then, almost on cue, the second we stop screaming, it starts again for 4 seconds, then goes out again. And this illuminates a figure slightly. You can't see it well because whatever it is wearing a robe, but it's an actual thing there. The fire goes out again. We all scream and run away from there. I was so scared and worried that my mum or dad would go out to investigate with the other parents and get hurt that I didn't even tell them. Nobody did. Even 15 years on, it still haunts the life out of me to this day. The thing is, we know nobody was on the island because we could see it was clear during the daytime and we never heard a boat go in there. It's literally the worst experience of my life. I even have goosebumps now thinking of it. When I first returned from the war, I was a power line rigger. This was on EHV lines, which are extra high voltage, the kind on top of the steel towers. Those are transitional lines, not sub-transitional like most inner city lines. So anyway, I had a job during a heavy windstorm in 2008 to go out and repair some lines near Colorado and the New Mexico border. It was great pay since it was an emergency call out, so I agree. I met up with my crewman and head down from the Colorado Springs area. We get there at around 9 PM and start getting to work. Windstorms are notorious for failing lines, but not EHV or UHV lines, since they are rigged differently. When I crane up to see the broken link on the tower and inspect the damage, I remembered seeing over the tops of most trees. I observed the view for a moment and saw some nearby lights from a campfire. As soon as I saw the lights, I hear yelling coming from that area. Now it must have been about 300 yards away, but I hear a woman yelling. She kept saying, "Someone please help," over and over again. I crane down and start yelling for the guys. They heard it too, and were asking questions. This is really odd. We never see anyone out there. I told them about the campfire lights coming from the direction our trucks were facing. We jump in one of the smaller trucks since it's a 4x4 and head down the road. We look everywhere for the light, but don't see a thing. We drove back and forth and then back again and slowed down. We rolled down the windows and stopped the truck in the area where the light should be. We all heard moaning sounds coming from the right of our trucks, so to the north. It sounded like 2 people are having heart attacks, and I mean really loud. So now we're on edge. The site supervisor was calling the police now. Given the general area we're at, they told us to check to see if we feel safe. Because I have the war veteran attitude, I decided to look. 2 guys came down with me, and our supervisor stayed with the truck to wait for police. Apparently, they had a station not too far, like 15 minutes or so away. I armed myself with a pickaxe, and the other guys had conduit pipes like 1 inches. We all started walking through the trees with our headlamps on, because it got really dark now. The moaning's still coming from ahead of us. We got through the trees into a small clearing. It looks empty. The moaning stopped. We checked around and hear nothing. We went back to the truck, and as soon as we got there, we heard the woman yelling again, yelling the same thing. "Someone please help." It was just to the north of where we were. One of the guys yelled back saying, "Where are you?" and gets no reply. Then we hear her scream in pain, and nothing else. We're already running back north and called the police, but they've showed up. They must have seen us running north because 2 of them came after us. We stopped in the field area and they stopped with us and asked what was going on. We told them. They helped us look around and saw nothing. We walked back to the truck and didn't hear anything else. They said they would hang out for us and check if anything else happened, so we get working again. The police are now parked next to each other, talking while we worked. When I craned up, I can't see any campfire lights or anything. We did the job. Took about an hour and a half until we're done. When we were packing our tools to head out, one of the cops left and the other comes with us. He told us that just to the west, there was a small plane that crashed and people burned to death. He said the police and paramedics got to the scene and the fire's still going. He told us about how 2 bodies were found away from the plane, crawling away from it, and one of the bodies is still there somewhere buried from the 70s or 80s. Yeah, we packed up fast and got the hell out of there. Now I never saw a fire, just light on the trees. Now I can't tell you how creepy that stuff is to find out afterwards, and the voices and moans were so clear. I always kind of believed in the afterlife after this, but God did it mess my head up. I'm so glad other people were there to experience it though. The cop believed us too. But didn't hear anything about reports of a fire or anything else in the area afterwards. Back when I was a Boy Scout, I took a weekend-long training course called National Youth Leadership Training. One of the last parts of the course was an overnight hike into the woods with no guide to find our designated campsite and see how we would work under stress. We finally got to our campsite and began to unpack. We each bought a tent, but half of us left ours behind to lighten the load and buddied up. Lo and behold, my buddy brought a one-man tent only. Either I slept outside or things are going to be really cramped and I didn't want that. The sky was clear and I slept under the stars. The next morning, 4 of the other guys claimed that they saw a coyote walk up to me, sniff my face, stare at me, and leave. They were too scared to go and make it leave. They stuck to their guns though, but I didn't believe them. 4 years later, I was working at the camp as a staff member, and I'm speaking to a senior there, and apparently he said coyotes are pretty common there, and they often boldly show up. It made me realise what the guys were saying wasn't a lie. I just can't believe they let me sleep with a coyote literally at my face. God knows what would have happened if I'd woken up. I went camping with some friends near Lochmond in Scotland. We set up camp about 3 miles into the woods near a small river and got the fire going to cook some food we brought with us. The site is very remote, but in the evening, a couple of guys hiked through and stopped to chat with us. They're from Poland and seem friendly enough, but ask a lot of questions about our group, how many we were, etc. and I'm a bit suspicious, but I put it down to being from different cultures. It's around 10 PM. I start to feel very ill, and I'm thinking, is it possibly from food poisoning? Now, I'm very confused about this because I'm sure the food was cooked correctly. My friends are all pretty drunk, and I had drunk about 4 or 5 cans of Budweiser. Stupidly, I packed my bag after throwing up hard for 15 minutes and decide to hike back to the main road, watching light fading in the distance. I'm about a mile into the hike back. At this point, I've been sick twice and am completely sobered up by throwing up so much. I've got sports bottles full of water. I now stop to rinse my mouth out. At this point, it's near pitch black, so I got into my bag to get out my torch, small knife and my .22 air gun. As I start zipping my bag back up, I hear twig snap nearby and assume it's a rabbit or fox. I shine my torch, but there's nothing. This doesn't make sense because surely I'm at least going to see reflective eyes, but oh well. 5 minutes later, I hear what sounds like running, maybe 100 yards behind me, and lots of twigs snapping. I turn around and assume it's my friend, and I say, "Are you kidding me?" I said I knew someone's there, and I'm not joking. I see movement through the trees probably 80 feet away. Whatever this is big. I mean 6 or 7 feet tall and completely black. At this point, my sickness is gone, and my heart's beating through my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I get this feeling that I can only describe as feeling almost dizzy at the surreal position that I found myself in. I take off my rucksack and hang it up. I kill my torch. I still think it's my friends, but I have this horrible feeling. It was too big. I've got my knife though in my jacket pocket, and my pistol gripped harder than I can possibly ever do normally. I walk in the darkness for about 100 yards and stop dead behind a tree and wait. I'm trying my hardest to control my breathing, but it's supremely difficult now. Sure enough, I hear movement again. Very difficult to pinpoint, but it's getting closer. Now I'm caught in two minds, to continue to hide or confront. I decide the latter, and now I burst out from the brush. I'm in two minds, but I have to run now. I point my torch in the general direction of the sound, and there's branches moving. I start moving away from the area like an SAS trooper. I hear distance movement again. Lots of twigs breaking now, from heavy footprints. I don't see anyone now, but I know I'll shoot them. Silence now. I wait a few minutes and head back for my backpack. It's not hanging over the branch anymore. It's on the ground. That's the scariest part for me. Whatever I've been chasing could have never beaten me back to my bag. So something or someone else moved it. The branch is intact, which doesn't make sense either. At this point, I tabble out onto the main road pretty sharp with no incident. I call my fiance, who quickly picks me up, and I'm violently sick. I believe it's from fear. I tell her about what happened and she's freaking out. To this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. I do know I was terrified and I've never experienced anything like it before or since. I've had a truly weird encounter before. I lived in Southern California at the time, up in the San Gabriel Mountains, a couple of hours east of LA. I know when people think of Cali, they all seem to think of the beaches, but I assure you, the land here is very diverse. My hometown is super tiny and has a fairly popular ski resort on the western side of town. If you take the only highway out past the ski resort for several miles, there's literally nothing but forest. And a very old gold mine is actually still there, and it's kind of cool. After those things, there's nothing but national forest. And then, one insanely isolated, very old restaurant that still functions, and then back to the forest for a long time. Anyway, just setting the scene. I was about 10 or 11 when this happened. It's almost Christmas. It snowed heavily, and the snow's still falling on the evening of this happening. My stepdad decided that we would cut down our own Christmas tree this year, so we get into my mum's big Dodge truck and headed off to the mine, which is a couple of miles past the ski resort. We got to the base of the road and were talking and laughing, etc. My stepdad was driving pretty slow since it was snowing decently. They had ploughed part of this road recently too, and there were big snow berms on either side of us, down near up to the top of the truck, probably 8 feet off the ground. So it's just barely getting dark now. Not quite dark, but twilight, I guess. So not dark enough that we can't see anything, but dark enough that the headlights of the truck are on. Quite suddenly, from over on my side, there comes a huge dark shape that arches over the top of the snow berm. It lands in the middle of the road fairly gracefully almost. My stepdad slams on the brakes. I am too stunned to speak or even scream, because there crouching in the middle of the road is some creature. It has a long muzzle and pointy ears, covered in fur. Now, I have really never seen anything like it. This all happens in seconds. The thing jumps down and crouches, glancing at us. My stepdad slams on the brakes, and then it just vaulted up and over the beam and disappeared. It must have been 6 or 7 feet tall. I have never seen anything quite like it. My stepdad refused to talk about it when I asked, terrified. If he had seen the same thing too, I knew he did because how quick he braked, and that he was wide-eyed and white for the rest of the journey. I never did bring it up again because we hadn't had the best relationship since then, but sometimes I wish I could know what actually happened then. It still shakes me to my very core, even to this day. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forest, some great state parks, and tons of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is also relatively poor. Or there are some of out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places. A lot of the people from where I am are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I do a lot of work online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of them small towns that will rob you of your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay there for too long. No opportunities or chances for the people that fairly deserve it. And nothing for miles around, like honestly, you're trapped there. I hated it. To the east of my town, there's a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and lots of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog, but it can be a bit of an unnerving experience sometimes. It's about a 10-mile drive from town, and there's no cell phone service for miles or houses. In the past, there's been a lot of vehicle break-ins on the trailheads, I mean, literally, the gravel there is littered with bits of broken glass from what I can only assume is break-ins. Sometimes, there's really shifty people hanging around those trailheads or just driving around out on the forest roads. There are really rough roads, and you'll see these beat up $500 cars barreling along them that are meant for a 4x4. Some of the people you see in the cars look like the guy that got crushed by an ATM in Breaking Bad. All that said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you have to be careful. A few years ago, 2 friends of mine and I decided to play paintball in the National Forest. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip, so we can play the next morning also. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drive a couple of miles to one of the most popular camping spots. Sadly, a church group or something had taken off all the spots. This really got us annoyed. This was really the only camping spot that we're familiar with, and it's getting late. We decide to keep on looking, so we drive for about an hour further into the woods. By now, it's getting dark, and we're getting worried about finding a spot. We all had GPS on our smartphones, but no service of course. We turn off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in very good shape. In fact, it looks like the Forest Service rangers used a backhoe to block off the road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier lay in the woods nearby. That being said, it looked like a 4x4 had been going over the mound, so it's worn now. Our F-150 had pretty high clearance, so we decided to go over it. Now, there was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove for a few miles down the road, coming across an opening next to a creek. There were some blue traps hanging over a plywood nailed to a tree. That's odd. That said, it was pretty much dark now, and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck light running, and we set up in the tent. After we set up, I start noticing there's a lot of trash in the woods. I see a green bottle on the ground. I took a look at the label and see that it's a bottle of some home and garden insecticide. I was really tired now and thought someone was dumping some garbage here. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage here when we're more than an hour away from the nearest home. We set up camp, have some beers and made chili from scratch. By this time, it's probably 11 PM and we're eating. We noticed a faint glow from the other side of a nearby hill. At first, we thought it was moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles don't make sense. It seemed like it was far too bright and wasn't moving. It's a kind of glow you see over a big bright city, and we don't see the light source itself. Since there were no other access roads in the area, we decided it's not campers. The hill was about a quarter of a mile from our campsite, and we investigate. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have done it. However, we had a few rum and cokes in our stomachs, and 2 of us decide to look. My other friend decides to stay. He's gonna do some popcorn on the fire. So we start walking towards the light source, and the situation gets stranger. All the trees in the area have their bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. It could have been beavers, but why would they go all the way around a tree in a perfect circle? We start talking about the ghost in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. As we're almost to the top, my friend falls and yells out. A few seconds later, the light goes out, We look at each other and decide that maybe we don't need to see what it is after all. Walking back in silence and keep on looking back every few seconds, we decide to turn off our flashlights and return to the campsite with the moonlight guiding us. We get a couple of 100 feet from the campsite. I can see my other friend Isaac walking around. He's wearing a hooded coat that I've never seen him wear before. For some reason, he has a paintball gun. That seems odd. We look at each other. The fire's dying down. We don't see the campsite well. Now, we've been gone for an hour. From the distance, it appears as though my friend is looking for something. He kept walking around the site and peering in. When we're almost back to the campsite, we see our friend walk up the road we came from. We figure he's went to the bathroom and didn't want to wander through the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to our fire waiting for him to return. All of a sudden, we see him lurch out of the tent and vomits. After we left, he had a few more drinks apparently. We ask him why he's wandering around with the paintball gun, and he gets a strange face and says, "They're locked in the cab of the truck." "Did you unlock it?" "No." We go to the truck and enter the door code and see our paintball equipment just as we left it before. The keys to the truck are hidden underneath a magnetic fob. I get a sinking feeling. What were you doing after we left? I watched a movie then fell asleep. But wait, you were walking around with a paintball gun, right? Did you just change jackets? He said he'd been in the tent the whole time, wearing the same unhooded fleece. Someone had been walking around our campsite, and it wasn't him. At this point, of course, we're all too drunk to drive, but we decide to go ahead and pack up and go back to my house for the night. We don't bother packing up the tent, we just fold it with the sleeping bags and think, heck, jumping in the F-150. When we get up to the dirt hump, we see something grey blocking our path. The metal barrier that's been laying in the woods is now erect. By this point, we've all sobered up. No one wants to get out of the car to try and move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of my truck, so I slowly tap it. It falls over, and we drive very slowly over it, terrified we're gonna pop one of the tires and be stranded. It didn't. As we drive down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it on the moonlight. I now begin to drive as quick as I possibly can. The vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It just stays 1 or 2 turns behind us, but always follows. After 45 minutes of speeding, we get back to the main paved road. I start to drive everyone back to my home and decide to go a different way. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. Rural camping can be very dangerous, and we've never went back there since.